Hey guys, it's Dawson. So in this video, we're going to break down Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto. He wrote it after a season of writer's block where he didn't write a note for 3 to 4 years after being depressed after the premiere of his first symphony. In this video, we're going to talk about how Rachmaninoff musically ties the three movements together and by using melodies and motives across all three movements and what makes it so beautiful. So buckle up and here we go. Now this piece is very interesting because it almost kind of follows maybe from the beginning of that season that Rachmaninoff was in, and then as the three movements go on, just erupts into joy and beauty, something that maybe Rachmaninoff even experienced in his own life. It starts very dark with this piano chords like this. And you can just hear the pain in these chords that maybe Rachmaninoff was experiencing, this darkness. It's almost kind of interesting when you think about how a lot of piano concertos are written. They might start like with an orchestra introduction, something very joyful, or even if it's a minor song, it's just something, it's not very introspective. But the way that Rachmaninoff started this piece with just the piano, the orchestra hasn't even played anything yet, and these chords, in fact, it's an F minor chord, and this piano concerto is in C minor. So it's almost like Rachmaninoff is starting this piece in the wrong key. He's starting with the F minor chord. So normally start with your one chord, your tonic chord, which in this key would be C minor. Now he's getting there, but he starts with these chords, this progression. It's almost like these chords stay the same, but the inner notes are changing. C, a D flat, D, E flat. That raises one of the upper notes from an A flat to A natural. Now he starts going back down, but it's been a big crescendo, so even though the notes are now going back down on the insides of the chord, now the dynamics are still rising. We're going somewhere. And then he turns that F minor chord into kind of its rightful place as a subdominant chord, the fourth chord in the scale, and lands on in a big cadence in the key of C minor. Finally, the right key is still very dark, but at least we get a little bit of that resolution there. And then from there, the piano launches into these arpeggios. And the strings come in, violins down low. Russian march, very, very dark, very sinister, and again, this is music that Rachmaninoff was likely writing from his soul. If you go back and look at some of Mozart's music, it didn't matter what he was going through in his life, his music kind of always sounded the same. It was always very buoyant and joyful. That was just the style that he wrote in, because in Mozart's day, composers didn't really let their life circumstances dictate the music that they wrote. But fast forward to not long, the next generation, or a little bit later than Mozart, with Beethoven, and then the composers that came after him in the Romantic period, and Rachmaninoff's here in the very late Romantic, very end of that period, and leading into the 20th century. And now composers really used music and their compositions as a vehicle to express the deepest groans of the soul. And so that's what you're hearing there. You can just imagine the pain that Rachmaninoff had from that the last piece he'd written, a symphony that was just a complete flop and just a disaster. And he became the laughing stock of all composers and musicians during that time, because he'd written this joke of a symphony, and then he's just kind of letting that come out. Well, as the piece goes on, of course, that's I told you, it's like a march. It goes into the second theme. The second theme is very beautiful, and there's something here. The piano takes the melody, and there's this melody that just reaches. If you're in the key, he's in the key of E flat, which is the relative major of C minor. So we've gone from C minor, which the key signature has 3 flats, to E flat major. That key signature has 3 flats. So this is what we call the relative major, and very similar notes here, but it's kind of the lighter version. And he's got this melody. And with that melody, he's outlining the key of E flat, which is the tonic chord, but he goes one note further. And it's almost like, again, even in this major key, you get that glimpse of sorrow and pain and yearning. And that's like the ultimate romantic ideal is of this this soaring thing, this very passionate music, composers pouring their soul out through their music. And so here it is in the piano, going one note further. So it just goes on, very different from the first theme, which is that march, to very legato, and this flowing left hand. One of the things that I think Rachmaninoff is a genius in was using these colorful harmonies, lots of chromaticism, and then very different from the music of Mozart and his day. And in the Romantic period, composers began to experience with chromaticism, just changing 1 or 2 notes of a chord, moving them down a half step, and using kind of more notes, even some notes that wouldn't necessarily seem to fit in key and or in a chord, ones that we would think to our ears would be dissonant, but he just uses them in these little passing ways, like. You just feel that moving chromatically down. It probably doesn't sound that foreign to our ears now, because we've heard this music or music similar to it, and we've heard what's come after it, right? This music is 120 years old now. But in this day, in the day and age of this music, a lot of this chromaticism, these just little chord alterations, changing these notes at a time, could really perk up the ears of the listener. Even chords like, remember the second chord of this piece, right here. You get that grunge of a what's called a minor second, which is a C and a D flat. If I played that note for you, those 2 notes for you, that you'd probably say, that doesn't really agree with my ears. But then, if you think about it as something that's passing, something that's moved, it does. It's not that it doesn't matter. It's just that it's being used as part of the bigger picture of something, a tapestry of all of these wonderful harmonies. Well, so that's kind of most of the first movement of that. The second movement of this concerto is beautiful. It's in E major, which is a very foreign concept too. Compared to like Mozart, and Mozart wrote piano concertos too, but he would keep for the middle. If it's a 3-movement concerto, it would be like the first movement would be in C, the second movement would be in F or something like that, and then back to C. And but what Rachmaninoff is doing here with C minor for the first movement and E major, 2 very different, 3 flats, 4 sharps. That's actually what we call it's called a chromatic third relationship. C to E is not a chromatic third necessarily, but when we talk about the key of C minor, when we would think of a third up from that C, we would think of that E flat. We would probably use more like that E flat, like in the first theme and the second theme of the first movement. But when we're talking about the movements here from C minor to E major, if I even just juxtapose those harmonies there for your ears, you might think that those, how would you transition between those, apart from just starting the first movement ends in C minor and You can think, how could you get to the key of E flat? Well, Rachmaninoff does something really, really striking there. And I want to play it for you. So he actually does start the second movement with that C minor chord. In fact, his key signature here already is 4 sharps. So he's kind of starting again, just like the first movement. He's starting the piece out of the key. So he's starting in C minor, following from the first movement. Goes to a B flat, which resolves to an E flat major in first inversion, F minor. So we're still solidly in the key of C minor. He's had 5 chords and the 5th chord is still a C minor chord. He hasn't gone anywhere yet, but check this out. Okay, if I were to play that chord, that would sound to you like a chord that belongs in C minor, right? Well, and if you're in the key of C minor, that would be an A flat major chord, which is the sub-median. It's a major chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? That is a diatonic chord in the key of C minor. But what he actually does is he respells it. You see, all notes have more than one way to spell it. You've got the pitch, and then you have the spelling. In the same way, like if I could play an E flat, or if I play this note, I could either be spelled as an E flat or as a D sharp. I could either spell this note as an F sharp or a G flat, G sharp or A flat. And if you're writing this, you would write the note that makes the most sense based on where you are and where you're going. So if you're going to stay in the key of Rachmaninoff, we're going to stay in the key of C minor, he would spell that as an A flat. Remember where he's going? He's going to E major. Okay, so what he does is he respells that from an A flat major chord to a G sharp major chord, and then he drops his bass down a step to an F sharp, and then I'm in E major. So first he does is it's all a matter of a respelling. He uses inharmonic notes, which is how a note can be either sharp or flat. That's its inharmonic equivalent. And so that's what he does. C minor, E flat major, F minor, C minor, G sharp major, drops the bass, and now all these chords belong to the key of E major and lead us right to E major. But wait, there's more. Actually, check out what he does. Do you remember that melody that I played for you in from the first movement that I said it went one note further? Okay, so it outlined this chord, and then it went here. Guess what that note is? That's an A flat, okay? Now, do you remember this melody from the second movement? Recognize that? It's the same note, it's the same pitch. And so what he's doing, even though it's a little bit different, he's transformed that melody from the second theme of the first movement to this introduction. Can you hear the correlation? So it's just a mark of genius that Rachmaninoff used to get from C minor to E major, a chromatic third relationship, but that's what he did. And so now we're in E major, and you get this beautiful flowing chromatic line from the piano. Okay, that's just 4 bars of notes. Okay, these are triplets, and so he's got these pattern of notes. He's actually using a 4-note pattern, but it's triplets, which are 3 notes worth of rhythm. So there's kind of an overlap. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So what he's doing actually is he's holding over some of these harmonies. So remember talking about chromaticism, where you have these little notes that don't make sense necessarily. There's chord alterations, and so he gives you like part of the chord, but part of the chord, like it's an E major chord, but it's got a little bit of a hangover from the chord before that. Right? That doesn't sound like a chord that makes sense to us, but again, it's just passing through. It's just chromatically weaving us around, moving back down like this. There's a new chord there, and a resolution, but some of the last chord right here. Now, another thing, a way to do chromaticism is just by these descending half steps, chromatic lines. You can hear these notes moving down a half step each time, and so that's just the accompaniment. Okay, so then that repeats, and Rachmaninoff writes this melody. It starts in the flute, and then he does this. One of my favorite moments in orchestration is where he. The line starts with the flute, and then the clarinet picks up where it leaves off, and it's almost like this new instrument, because our ears are just hearing the notes, but an instrument is going to provide the color. Think about the breathy sound of a flute, and then think about the more focused sound of the clarinet, a more mellow sound. So you go like from light to a little bit darker and more mellow sound, but all just within the same melody. That's a neat thing about writing for orchestra. Piano, you can kind of simulate some of those color changes, but not like you can with an orchestra. So here's that melody. Let's change to clarinet now. You can see it's just very slowly moving, and you can almost hear some of that sorrow. Again, we're in a major key, but some of that sorrow that we heard expressed in the first movement. Beauty, but sorrow. And so as Rachmaninoff was kind of recovering from that season of depression, that's what's going on here. So that melody that I just played for you fits over the accompanying triplets that I played for that. That's kind of the premise of the second movement. And we're coming into the third movement. He's in E major, and he's got to get back to C minor, and he ends that second movement in E major. And so what he does to kind of tie everything together again is, instead of just starting back in C minor for the third movement, he starts it in E major. And again, starting in the wrong key, right? All right, now what he just did is what's called a same tone or a common tone modulation. He's in E major, and he's actually going to the key before he goes to C minor, he's going to go to C major. Okay, if you were to hear these two chords, and these actually have more in common than C minor, because C minor has an E flat, doesn't even have an E natural, which is the tonic. Doesn't even have the tonic of E in that chord, but C major does. So if you were to hear those two chords, you might hear that this note and this note is part of both of the chords, both of the keys, and so that's what he does. And that's a way to modulate from a key, is if you have this chord, and then you take one of the notes, that the key where you're going to have, and you take the note that those two keys have in common, and then you carry that note over into the new key, and it makes for a really, really neat, almost kind of like a sneaky way to get into that key. Listen again, you're almost going to miss it. Starting in E major, C major, and now he's going to go. He's bringing in some of those flats. Remember, he's got to get to C minor. He's like, I'm in C major. I've got to bring in these flats so that I can get to the key where I'm going. That's a G major chord, which if you know your theory, that's a 5 chord or a dominant chord in C minor, okay? And that's where he's wanting to go. And the way to get where you want to go a lot of times is to take the dominant chord, because that will lead you to a cadence, a 5-1, or what's called an authentic cadence. 5-1. Okay, that's where he's going. But he kind of camps out on this. Okay, hadn't gotten to C minor yet, hanging out on the 5. Piano is a big cadenza all over the place. Not resolving. The piano is staying in that G major harmony, still in the 5 and the 5, and then you start to wonder, well, maybe this is the one. Maybe this movement is going to be in G major. Who knows? Well, he before he resolves it, he does something again. He brings in something from the past. Okay, so the piano is okay. Now, if your ears heard that and perked up a little bit, then you must have good ears. Okay, here's where we want to go. 7 1 5 5 1. Okay, that's a cadence. That's that perfect. That's that authentic cadence we talked about. What he does is he does give us that note, the resolve, the leading tone, the B natural to the C, but he gives us a F minor chord. Okay, again, the wrong chord, almost like the wrong key. Well, what he's doing here, and almost if you didn't pay attention, you'll miss this. But this is before he's landed. We haven't even had a C minor chord yet, right? We've had C major. Now, instead of giving us a C minor, he gives us F. And he gives us this F minor harmony. Do you recognize that? Is that ringing any bells in your ears? Well, if you did, again, you've got good ears. Do you remember how this concerto, the first movement started? It started like this. F minor chord with that painful half step dissonant. Had these chords working. Well, actually, that's what he's doing again, is he gives us that F minor harmony, brings in these chromatic notes going up. Exact same progression right here in the introduction to the third movement. Now, again, I don't think his intention is that you'd go, oh, look, that's the music from the first movement, but it's almost like it's just a distant memory. It's like a deja vu, but with your ears. You hear that and you go, that sounds like something familiar, but you can't quite place it. But before you even have time to identify it, he goes, and now finally, after this long introduction, we get to our C minor chord. So a masterful way to modulate from E major to C minor, while at the same time bringing in things from the past. Well, now we finally hear the main theme and the first theme of the third movement, and it goes like this. Okay, now if you know this piece, you know I didn't play everything that's there, because that is the thing that's noticed, but the piano is much busier. It's more like this. Okay, there's a lot going on. Remember, this is a concerto, and concertos in the 19th and 20th century, and even before that, but even more so in this day, they were these vehicles for showmanship. Okay, you had these virtuoso pianists. It was almost kind of led by people like Liszt, Franz Liszt, who had lived in the 19th century. That people actually wondered if they had superhuman abilities, because their ability to play their instrument was just so on such a higher level. Paganini was another famous one, a violinist. So that's why there's so many notes. Again, it's not just notes just for the sake of showmanship, although there are some compositions that are like that. I really do feel that even though Rachmaninoff wrote a lot of notes, he does pick and choose what notes to write to where there's not too much bulk. So that's the main first theme of this movement. Now he comes into the second theme here, and again, if you compare the first theme of the first movement, that march, kind of slow and sorrowful march, and then we had the flowing legato. second theme. It's kind of the same way in the third movement because you've got this. Okay, oh, it was just very hair-raising, exciting, intense, and fast. And then you come to the second theme here, completely different character and mood. Check this out. Okay, so you can hear that. In fact, you may recognize that from something that song was used for, a song that Frank Sinatra took called "Full Moon and Empty Arms." He took that same melody and added words to that. So that this melody has appeared in some other contexts as well. Now, I stopped before the melody is over because I want you to recognize something. Remember how Rachmaninoff pulled from the past? He pulled from the first movement. Well, he's about to do that again in a subtle way. It's not a very in-your-face kind of way. It's just in a way that will trigger your ears, the memory of your ears, and it's almost just kind of like you have seen an old photograph, and you don't remember everything about that, but it brings back all the feels. Okay, Rachmaninoff's about to do that musically. Check that out. Check this out. I'm going to pick it up from just a little bit before from where I left off. Did you recognize it? Did you hear it? Do you remember the theme that went one note too far, right? That we even heard again in the transition from the first movement to the second movement in the introduction. He's done it again. There's the note too far. So again, he's bringing from the past, but now he's actually going to expand on it. Check this out. So he took that dee 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 da, right, that note too far, and he takes it to a higher key, and then he takes it to a higher key, and then he kind of lets it simmer down from there. So not only is he taking parts of the past, now he's what we call music development. He's developing them by putting them, by changing them in some ways, restating them higher and lower. So listen to that whole melody again, the second theme of this, and this is probably one of the most memorable parts of this whole concerto, and it's just in a moment that every time I hear it, it just brings me to tears because it is so beautiful, but it's because it's built on more than just itself. It's built on pieces from the past, and I think there's a life lesson there. You know, the Bible says in Ecclesiastes that there is nothing new under the sun, that, you know, everything that we might say or do or something like that has probably been done before, okay? I mean, think about how old the world is. And when we, you know, sometimes there have been a melody that I write or a chord progression, I'm thinking, wow, that is really something. I bet maybe no one has ever written something just quite like that before. And, you know, maybe exactly like that, maybe not. But then I'll go back and maybe sometime after that, I'll be listening to some music that someone else has written, and I'll hear it, and I'm like, that's why that melody felt so good, because I had straight up copied this for that, not on purpose, but unknowingly. It's like how music gets in our head, gets in our ears, and then it just comes out sometimes. And for me as a composer, I'll write something and go, oops, that's already been written. So now Rachmaninoff is not plagiarizing. I guess if you want to say he's plagiarizing himself, but he's building on the past. So here's the whole second theme from the third movement. goes on from there into a new theme. Incredible music. I mean, and so if you'll have to go and listen to this entire piece, because what he does in this movement, I'm just playing you like the themes of this concerto, just kind of some of the significant moments in there, but every bit of it is very exciting. He's going to take that and he's going to turn it into a fugue in the middle of this section, the development section, and then there's going to be another big piano cadenza that we heard at the beginning of this movement, and then after that, but he's going to transform from to the minor mode, that C minor that we were in, into C major. Okay, remember how the concerto started dark and it kind of gradually transforms into light, which is a philosophy used by a lot of different composers. Beethoven used it in his Symphony Number 5. They started right, very dark and very sinister, and then it's like Tchaikovsky used it in his 4th Symphony. Starting very dark and again just kind of spooky, and then it moves into by the time of the 4th movement it's just all joy, and that's what Rachmaninoff does here. He transforms from the minor mode into the major mode, and we get a final statement of that theme, the second theme that I played for you, but it's not with legato left hands. It's in a very grandioso just when it comes into that it just takes you on this journey that it just makes you want to jump up around the room and dance and all of that. What, you don't do that when you hear music? Maybe, I guess it's just me. Well, keep that secret between me and you. Well, so that is Rachmaninoff's 2nd piano concerto. Thanks for geeking out with me a little bit. This is, like I said, this is some great music. I want you to go and listen to the whole thing. It's about 35-40 minutes long. Go check it out, listen to it, and just praise God for giving us music that we can enjoy to such a wonderful extent. This is really, really awesome stuff. Music is a gift from God. So when you listen to it, I hope you're just led to be in wonder and awe of our God, and even of the talent that he gives men like Rachmaninoff. Now, there are people that use music. They may be using it for God's glory. They may not. But still, that doesn't negate the fact that God gave us music. Remember, there's nothing new under the sun. God is the one that created music, and he's the one that we can use music for. So make sure give all glory to him. That's Rachmaninoff's 2nd piano concerto. Thanks for following with me on that journey. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you liked it. If you did like it, I hope you'll subscribe to my channel, and so you can stay up to date on future episodes of Downbeats with Dawson. You can also watch all the music that I post on here, both past and music that's coming up in the future. So love to have you along for the ride, and we'll see you later.